Welcome to the Sports Nuts, everyone. We got a very, very special guest tonight, Michael Roth. We'll dive right into it right after the intro.
Welcome to Sports Nuts University. Welcome to Sports Nuts University. Hey, let's go. Hey, let's go. Welcome to Sports Nuts University. We run this show. We run this show. Welcome to Sports Nuts University. Hands up, get loud. Hands up, get loud. Welcome to Sports Nuts University. SNU, wow. Making you proud.
Sports Nuts back in the game. Make you remember the name. Brandon came with the vision. Matt brought it all in the frame. Nobody rocking like Shane. Give you them facts from the brain. Every take hot like a flame. Then us going out with a bang.
Welcome to Sports Nuts University. Hey, let's go. Hey, let's go. Welcome to Sports Nuts University. We run this show. We run this show. Welcome to Sports Nuts University. Hands up, get loud. Hands up, get loud. Welcome to Sports Nuts University. SNU, wow. Making you proud.
You are now listening to The Sports Nuts.
Welcome, everyone, to another edition of the Sports Nuts. I am Mark Livingston, and if you you know who I am joined by tonight. Gamecock legend, ace pitcher Michael Roth. Synonymous for one of the greatest periods of Gamecock athletics. In our team's history, basically. Michael went from relatively unknown left-hander to becoming one of the most accomplished pitchers in college baseball, helping South Carolina win back-to-back national championships, became an All-American, starred on the biggest stage in Omaha, and eventually reached the majors. We're going to have a nice conversation about all that tonight. So you are in for a treat. So let me bring on my guest, Michael Roth. Hey, Michael, how
Mark.
you doing this evening? Nice of you to join me tonight, buddy.
No, thanks for having me.
Ah, man, you've been great. So I'm gonna go ahead and jump right into it, man. So first thing I want to do is I want to start back at the beginning as a young athlete, my friend. You growing up in Greer. What was baseball like for you growing up, and when did you realize you might have a chance to play beyond high school?
That's a good question. Um, I was playing baseball young. I think my mom actually lied on like a YMCA application so I could start playing t-ball early. I've got an older brother, like 11 years older than me, and an older sister, 8 years older than me. So I was around sports at a very young age. But I would say I played multiple sports growing up. Like when I was a kid, when it was basketball season, basketball was my favorite sport. When it was baseball, and so on. I would say when I started to realize that I could be pretty good at this was probably around 12 when we started doing like travel baseball and pitchers were pitching, at further, starting to get close to like, I think it was like 50 feet and then maybe it was something else before you get to 60 feet, 6 inches. So it was probably around there that when I started playing some travel baseball that I thought, oh, I could be really good. But quite frankly, when I was younger, if you asked me, I always wanted to play baseball as a professional athlete. So I was very fortunate that I was kind of able to accomplish that dream that I had as a kid.
Well, so basically, you said that basketball was your favorite sport, right?
Well,
And
during basketball season, it was kind of like whenever that sport was in season,
that was your favorite
that was
sport.
my favorite sport. Yeah.
Ah, got you. See, like my favorite sport to play is baseball. My dad always said he would never actually go in his backyard to watch the World Series. He actually hated baseball. Um, but,
That's fair.
But now you weren't necessarily viewed as this future college baseball superstar till you came out to be coming out of high school. So, how did USC enter the picture for you?
Yeah, I actually went to South Carolina because I wanted to play first base. I didn't want to pitch. So when I was getting recruited in high school, it was to play every day. So like your father, I really enjoyed playing baseball. Watching baseball um, wasn't my favorite. I enjoyed doing things, and still to this day, like I'm more of a doer.
Mhm.
Um, so when I chose Carolina, it looked like a great opportunity for me to kind of step in and have an opportunity to play at first base right away. Smoke was probably getting drafted and going pro. Um, and so when I stepped on campus, my goal was to try to be the starting first baseman. Obviously, that's not what happened. Um, but I'll never forget. I mean, it was the summer going into my freshman year. I was playing at Sarge Fry with my summer ball team, and I think I had pitched that day or something. Like I was still pitching, um, and Mark Calvey pulled me aside. He was like, "Hey, like I know you want to go. I know you're coming here and you want to play first. Like I don't want to mess that up." But he was like, I want you to throw some bullpens on the side in case we need you to pitch." And I was like, "Yeah, that's fine." Like I liked pitching. It wasn't that I
Mhm.
didn't like pitching. It was that I didn't. I knew at the time you were kind of like a position player or you were a pitcher, and I
Right.
didn't want to get shoehorned into one
Right.
spot. So that's kind of how it ended up, and that's how I ended up at Carolina.
Well, it seemed to work out good for you and us as Gamecock fans. So
Yeah.
we were glad how it kind of turned out. Now, I want to take you to your first start. So you were a bullpen guy. A lot of people don't realize that they really follow baseball, the Gamecock baseball team, because they just see you as the ace during the College World Series, but you were in the bullpen, and you got called for your first start, 2010, against Clemson. So, out of all the teams that to play in the College World Series, you're going against our arch nemesis. So, with the season on the line, how did you mentally prepare for that moment?
Um, I don't necessarily know that there was a whole lot of preparation. I can kind of remember, yeah, I was the lefty specialist in 2010. I was
Mhm.
coming in and I think I made, I was like 30 appearances going into the College World Series. So some of those were an inning, some of those were for a batter. And again, that wasn't my preferred way to play.
Right.
Because sitting in the bullpen can get kind of boring, and you have to come up with games to keep yourself occupied. Um, but yeah, I think after that Oklahoma win, where Jackie walked it off in extra innings, they were kind of running around like, "Hey," trying to figure out who's going to start the next day. And I remember Holbrook pulled me aside and was like, "Hey, can you pitch tomorrow?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course." I threw like, I had pitched in that Oklahoma game. I don't really remember what I threw, but I was like, "Yeah, I'll be fine to throw." And then it wasn't really till that morning that I realized, well, and then they came into at curfew. Tanner asked if I would be fine to start, and I was like, "Yeah, I don't have a problem with that." So it wasn't necessarily that I didn't really approach it any differently. I think I basically told Coach Tanner, I was like, "I'm fine starting as long as I still get to hit batting practice." Because again, that was what I liked.
You like
I
to hit.
liked hitting and doing all that stuff. So um, I wouldn't say I changed anything. I just kind of approached it like I was throwing, just I was starting, but it was just like I was coming out of the bullpen. And it was definitely didn't go into that game thinking I would throw a complete game, much less throw as many innings as I threw. But it was more of just approaching that game like I had the whole season. Like I threw with Parker Banks, who was my catch partner.
Mhm.
Um, like lead up to the game. So I kind of did everything the same. It was almost as if I was just coming out of the bullpen in the first inning.
Well, like I said, man, that's a big moment. I'm not only like I said to play in the College World Series, your first start, and it's against your arch nemesis. So that kind of sets me up for the next question. Um, Clemson and South Carolina, they already have one of the fiercest rivalries in college sports. So, did playing them in Omaha, did that make it feel any bigger than any of the other games?
You know, yes and no. Like when we, when we were playing them, we knew we had to win two in a row, obviously.
Hmm.
And Steve Bondurant was our um, he was our like academic advisor at the time, and he was in Omaha with us, and he had pitched I think one of the games back in 2002 or three, um, where South Carolina beat Clemson two in a row to advance to the finals as well. And
Hmm.
so we knew that about that history, even though we knew about that history and we were kind of joking about trying to repeat it. So obviously we weren't big fans of Clemson, but I think it was the rivalry's big, but I
Hmm.
think we knew the history behind us, and we also at the time we felt like we just had a lot of wind in our sails to put us ahead.
Well, after beating Clemson, you guys still had UCLA uh, sitting in front for the national championship. So I know it's a long time ago, but can you remember about the mindset of the team going into the championship series?
Yeah, I think we were one just happy to be there. It wasn't that you know, that we thought we were not going to win. I think we just all along the way we were kind of like um, pleasantly surprised at how we kept winning and pulling things off, and we would kind
Mhm.
of pull rabbits out of our hats each time, whether it was a walk off win against Oklahoma or pulling two wins against Clemson. And then if you look at the very first game, we were playing Garrett Cole, and obviously he was a very hype pitcher, and UCLA had a great team on,
Mhm.
obviously, and a ton of players that were um, a lot more highly regarded than maybe anybody that was on our team at the time.
Right.
Um, but if you look back at the Garrett Cole game, we were just getting like these hits, and it was almost like death by a thousand paper cuts against Garrett Cole. We'd
Mhm.
get like dribbles through the six hole or find a hole, in the outfield, and we were kind of laughing on the bench throughout the whole time, like, man, we're just like squeaking out these hits or like finding these holes against an obviously incredible pitcher. And then
Still
when
a
we
great
won
pitcher.
that, yeah, right, still a good pitcher. And when we won that game, I think it was just like we felt like we had the momentum. Going into that game, but also kind of seeing how the ball bounced for us, literally. Um, I think it gave us a lot of positive momentum.
Well, that's going to kind of take me into this next one because I remember watching this game, and when Merrifield knocked in Trey Wingo in that 11th inning, I remember I was living in Simpsonville in an apartment complex, and I started sandstorming through the parking lot. Um, so, literally the parking lot through where I was blasting sandstorm through the parking lot dancing. So, what do you remember about that moment? What do you remember seeing during that moment?
Yeah. I remember Wingo getting a 3-2 count and then watching him turn to bunt, and us obviously he took it and got walked, and then us kind of looking at each other like laughing, like what the hell was he doing? And I didn't know that Tanner had given him the sign to bunt, and so that he did that because he didn't want Wingo to swing at it,
Right.
and so we were in the dugout. We had all our rally caps on. I think we
Hmm.
had like socks pulled down, pants pulled up. We were doing all sorts of ridiculous things that just to kind of eke out a run because we knew that was a big moment for us. Um, and obviously, once Witt connected, we kind of knew it was a hit right away. We knew it was going to score Wingo, and then obviously all hell broke loose.
Oh man, all over the place, dude. Like I said, South Carolina fans, we've been dying for that moment. So once again, I remember I was watching my wife thought I was crazy because I literally was dancing through the parking lot sandstorming. Um, now, now, so now you follow up that season. So now you're listed now as basically the Friday night ace now at the next season. So you go from that breakout performance in Omaha to now being listed as the ace in the next season. How different were you as a pitcher entering that season?
Um, yeah, I still think I would say going into the season, I didn't honestly know whether I would be a starter or not. I think Coach Tanner was trying to mull that over. We brought a new pitching coach in with Coach Myers, and Coach Calvi was taking like a head coach and waiting job. Um, so Coach Tanner was actually pretty upfront in the coming into the fall. He was like, "Hey, I don't know if we're going to make you a starter or if we're going to keep you as a reliever. Like, I'm not sure what's going to happen." And I don't necessarily knew that I don't think I cared one way or another. It wasn't necessarily an issue for me. Um, so I was still trying to figure out how to hit, honestly. But as we got closer to the season, it actually looked like as we started getting into I guess the spring, but it's really in January when you report back after Christmas break when we started doing the scrimmages. I was kind of in the rotation. It looked like I was going to be the Saturday guy, and then like 2 weeks kind of before the season, they ended up putting me in. I think it was right around then. It was about 2 weeks or a few weeks before the season was starting, is when Coach Shanner had told me I was going to start the first game on the Friday night game or day game at the time. And I think it didn't bother me. It wasn't. I think I had a lot of confidence going in whether I was going to be a starter or the Friday night starter, the Saturday starter, or just a reliever. I think the performance that I had from 2010 and leading into the 2011 season, I think I just had built up a lot of confidence in myself and in my ability that whether I was starting or not, I felt pretty comfortable going out there and doing what I needed to do. And obviously, as that starting role gets put on you, you do start to take on a little bit more pressure and you start to like make it your own. But I feel like kind of how the season started, it just that confidence was able to build and kind of roll downhill for me.
Well, and that kind of brings me to my next question, actually, because you you seem very, very confident and comfortable on the mound, but you were never that overpowering pitcher that was going to overpower people with a 95, 97 mile an hour fastball. So what exactly do you think made you so difficult to hit?
That's a great question. I think I don't necessarily know that it was anything about my stuff that was exceptional. I didn't have like you said, I didn't have an overpowering fastball. Um, my changeup was okay. Like everything was just an okay pitch. If you graded me out like on a professional level, nothing was like very good.
Very
But I
consistent,
think,
basically, though.
well, I think for me, I knew what I wasn't, and so I knew I couldn't go out there and just overpower guys, or that I could throw the same pitches in a row. But I think I had a good read on hitters and what they were trying to do against me. So if I could see a hitter swing off of a certain pitch, I could read and figure out maybe what's the next pitch to throw. Um, I had I had the benefit of I could locate fairly well. A lot of times I was down in the zone and in and out. So I think I just never threw it in the same spot, you know, twice in a row unless I wanted to.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that was very helpful. And then I think the next thing really was just competitiveness. If I think back on the times when I played well in my career is when I was on the mound and aggressive and competitive and not shy away from, contact or anything.
Mhm.
And so the best times that I was able to go out there and, the times that I was at my best is when I was highly competitive and aggressive. And I think that sounds counterintuitive because you're the pitcher and you're on defense, but really you're the aggressor in that
Mhm.
scenario. Like you're the one that controls the ball. You get to dictate the timing. you get to dictate when where you're putting it and what type of pitch you're throwing. And so I looked at it as I was on offense. And I think that's, that with some of the skills that I had kind of led me to being effective on the mound.
Yeah, well, I think that was pretty well spot on from watching you play. That you could almost put the ball wherever you wanted to. It seemed like your control, like I said, you were never Randy Johnson, of course, but
No,
like
it
you
would have
said,
been nice though.
oh yeah, but you seemed very consistent and stuff. So like I said, I think that was pretty spot on. Now taking and going into that second championship, so winning one national championship, that's difficult. Now, what was different about trying to defend it in 2011 when now you're not the hunter, you're the hunted?
Yeah, I think in 2011, there's obviously the story about Tanner after we won the 2010 World Series and Rosenblatt. Tanner drives us by, TD, the new park that's being built, and it's like, wouldn't it be cool to come back? And we're all, like, damn, coach, can't you just enjoy the one that we did just win? But no, we obviously knew we had a solid core coming back. We knew we'd be missing a couple guys and had to fill a few gaps, and but we knew we had a solid group coming back from pitchers and outfielders and infielders. So we felt like we had a good group coming back to come in and play. And I would say the one thing that we never thought about throughout either of the runs that we made in Omaha was like winning the championship. It was never like, let's become champions. It was, we were kind of enmeshed in the process of just becoming a good team. We had some really strong leaders on that team. We had guys like Adrian Morales, who, just an incredible third baseman and kind of just a strong leader on the field. We had just a bunch of incredible individual players. I mean, Christian Walker, Jackie Bradley, Evan Marzilli, Adam I mean, you name it. Like, and then we had some people that filled the gaps that were just really good too. So, we thought we had a good team. I wouldn't say we thought we were going to go back and win the World Series again, but we knew that we could put together a good team and be competitive. And I think we just constantly push each other. Now, the other thing with that was we would always joke that we were kind of the average Joes, like in Dodgeball, like in the movie Dodgeball. Like we weren't like the sexiest team. Like at the time, we didn't have a player that was highly touted. And then obviously Jackie going into that year was kind of like a higher round draft pick, but nobody else was. And so we kind of always joked about being the average Joes, and which is funny because you look back on the teams and we had some guys that played in the big leagues or had some, that maybe even that didn't play in the big leagues and had some really good professional careers.
Yeah.
And so I don't think we thought, at that time, it's not like we ever thought we were the best, but we just knew we had a good team and that if we could play together each day and kind of focus on executing the game in front of us, that we would be in the position to win our last game.
Well, now, and that kind of takes me back to that year too, because y'all win the College World Series, and then y'all come back the next year, and y'all are still listed more like an underdog type of role. I believe Florida was still the most talked about team that year. Did y'all feel disrespected? And when y'all went into that game against Florida to win, did y'all take that chip on your shoulder going into that game?
No, I mean, I don't necessarily know that we felt disrespected. I think we just kind of felt like, oh, I mean, even going to that year, like Florida, yeah, had a great, obviously incredible team and a lot of guys that were kind of on the radar for big league teams. Vanderbilt too. I think they were very, very highly touted at the time. Arkansas was a great team. I mean, the whole SEC was stacked, but we weren't, even though we were kind of defending champions, we were not the belle of the ball at that time. But we just felt, it's not like we had a chip on our shoulder, but we felt like we could go out there and compete. And, for me personally, going out on Friday night and getting to pitch against Sonny Gray and getting a win, that was fun. Or, whoever was the Friday night guy for Florida, I can't even remember. But, like getting those starts to where it was really like the pressure wasn't on us, on me on Friday nights. It was like I was, for me, whoever I was going up against Friday night, I was kind of the underdog, and they were the highly touted pitcher that night, and so it kind of led to us just coming together as a team, and constantly overcoming and winning games. Especially late in the season when Jackie got hurt at Mississippi State, and then we dealt with Evan Marzilli going down, and then Neff, who was a relief pitcher, comes in and starts hitting doubles off the wall, playing outfield. So I think we just had a really good squad of guys that just had a lot of fun, didn't take themselves too seriously, but knew how to have fun playing the game. But when and also when it came down to it, how to execute and play baseball.
Well, and that was one of my questions also, because one thing about those teams is they were known to have some big personalities. Which teammate was like the funniest in the locker room to be around?
Scott Wingo, hands down.
Yeah,
I mean, hands down, the most ridiculous teammate I think I've ever played with. Just, an absolute lunatic and hilarious, and just funny to watch playing too, because he would get in the box and talk to himself, and he would get upset and frustrated, and so it was just Scott Wingo was just a gem.
Oh yeah, I can imagine, because you like you said, they would whenever he would go to bat, if you watch it on TV, they would show him actually talking to himself when he's in the batter's box and stuff. So I can kind of get that. Now, what was Ray Tanner like behind the scenes during these runs?
I don't know any other way than just say he was himself. I mean, I don't think he was anything different from what maybe the fans saw him versus how we saw him. I mean, he was fired up. He was demanding in a good way. At least as a player, he was the type of coach that he treated players differently, but it was in the fact that he needed to. He knew there were certain players he'd have to, take his arm around and on their put their arm around their shoulder and talk to them. And there were other players he would, get into their ass. And when I was younger, I didn't necessarily understand that and why that he did that way. But I recognize later, and obviously now, that he was able to tailor his coaching to get the best out of that individual player. But I mean, I think Coach Tanner wanted and still to this day wants to win probably more than anybody I know. I mean, he is competitive. He hates losing, and he wants to win every inch of every game.
I can actually see that. Like I said, I've never played for him, of course, but I've seen press conferences. I've seen him talk to the media, stuff like that. He seems very, very intense. So
Oh yeah, he is always. I think when we would lose games, it would keep him up at night to think about things that he could have done differently or moves he could have made. And so I think he was always analyzing how to be a better coach and how to pull different strengths to get the best out of us.
Now, when you look back on those two championship runs, you had 2010 and 2011. On 2010, you were, like I said, you were the bullpen guy, and then you got sprung into the game against Clemson, and we know how the story unfolded. 2011, now you are more listed. You're listed as the ace. You're the Friday night starter. You're listed as the guy on the team. When you look back on those two championship runs, which one do you reflect more on?
It's impossible to kind of split the two, quite frankly. Um, you know, at times at times you mix the games up, honestly.
Mhm.
So it's hard to differentiate, honestly. I mean, they're each they were both years were special moments. Obviously, winning the last one at Liv Rosenblatt, and then winning the first one in the new stadium. Um, but it was just a lot of fun. I mean, it was baseball in its purest sense. Some of the most fun baseball I can say I've ever played. Because you're with you're with everybody and trying to win, and that's all your focus is. It's just to win and have a lot of fun. And when you get into pro ball, that's sometimes not the case.
Right.
Um,
We'll get into that in a
but
little bit
it's
too.
yeah, it's just it's hard to differentiate the two, but they were both a lot of fun.
Well, watching you guys play, that was one thing that I always anybody watched y'all play those years, they were just out there having fun. It was almost like y'all were still in like, little league still, just having a good time. So that's what it kind of struck me as is a bunch of guys just who love to play ball. Um,
Yeah, I think that's the case. Everybody liked playing, liked having fun, and to Coach Tanner's credit and the rest of the staff, I think he let us be ourselves. He let us fool around, and he never let us take it to a point of disrespecting the game, or the other team. He just kind of let us police ourselves and have a lot of fun doing it.
Now I do have to ask you, the following year, now you're setting up for the three-peat. You run into Arizona, and of course, they ended that run. How difficult was that loss?
Yeah, it hurt. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I cried at the end of that last game. Um, but we had a lot of different we had a different team. We had 4 or 5 freshmen that were starting that year,
Right.
and they were obviously really good. I think, really what it kind of came down to is I think we kind of those bounces that were going our way in UCLA
Hmm.
were not going our way when we were playing Arizona. In fact, I remember it was like the fourth inning, fifth inning on that second game against Arizona, and I was pitching, and I think Evan Marzulli just like destroyed a ball into the gap, and the outfielder made like a heck of a play on it for an out, and Christian Walker was sitting next to me, and he looked at me and goes, "Man, this is like what Florida must have felt like when they played us, having the bounces go our way." And so it felt like especially in that second game, like we could not get any momentum going. Like we couldn't get a bounce, like we couldn't get a ball falling. Whereas Arizona just had, they had that momentum, and we had lost it.
Now I looked up your career because I knew it was great in Omaha, but I didn't realize how good. But it says 60 and a third innings in the College World Series, 8 starts, 4 wins, and a 1.49 ERA. Why do you think Omaha brought out the best in you?
Um, well, the new stadium is hard for people to hit home runs, so that was good. No, I mean, you know, obviously, I had a great time at Omaha and pitched really well, but I couldn't have done a lot of it without the team. If you look at those same stats, like I didn't strike a whole lot of guys out.
Right.
Scott Wingo and Bobby Haney, Peter Mooney, those guys got plenty of activity playing behind me. And so we had a really good defensive team. I mean, and that's something, again, Coach Tanner was highly focused on was being great up the middle. I mean, you had Jackie Bradley and Evan Marzilli and or Whit Merrifield, or sometimes it
Mhm.
was Adam Matthews, like tracking down balls in the outfield. So as a pitcher, I knew that all I needed to do was get the ball somewhere in the zone where I wanted it, and for the most part, let the guys behind me make great plays, and that's what they did. So I think it was just that, we obviously had a lot of momentum. One of the stats you did forget was I think I've got the College World Series record for the most hit batters. So that's a stat that I'm pretty proud of.
Now you don't have to tell me, but how many of those were intentional?
I don't think any of them were, honestly. I think it was me getting tired at the end of the game and pitching inside. So I was never good enough to hit any guys intentionally. I didn't want to give away the free base.
Oh, yeah. Makes sense. Makes sense. Now, you so now we're gonna take you now to you were originally drafted by Cleveland in 2011. But you decided to return to South Carolina. Two-part question to this. First of all, what brought you back to USC? Number one, and number two, how difficult was that decision?
Um, yeah, it's interesting how like things in life change. If going into the 2011 season, I think if you'd asked me, like, if I could have gotten drafted for 100 grand, like, would I have signed and gone pro? Yes, I think that was kind of like the thought going into the season. Um, one of the things that was a big influence on me was Brian Busher, who had played in the big leagues and the minor leagues, was our student coach that year in 2011, and he was going back to school, finish his degree. I don't remember how old he was, but I just remember him telling me one time, he was like, my wife's back at work. She's pregnant. I got my first kid on the way. I'm in school with a bunch of 21-year-olds,
Mm-hmm.
and all I see is my bank account dwindling. Um, and so, as I started to get deeper into the season, I think me coming back for my senior year was kind of the vision, because I wanted to have my degree, and I never felt like, for me to leave my senior year, leave the work that I'd put towards my degree, um, it felt like it would need to be something special. Like it would need to be what they might call life-changing money. Um, and, come the draft at that time was just such a, they're calling you, asking you what you want to sign for, and you're negotiating,
Mm-hmm.
um, and so yeah, I ended up falling to I think it was like the 31st round with Cleveland, and I actually had to do a study abroad for my degree. I was going in July,
Right.
so after we won the World Series, like I remember I like came down to Columbia, had fun with the guys one night, packed up my stuff, drove to my my parents' house in Greenville, because I was taking a flight the next day to go do my study abroad in Spain. And Cleveland called me and they're like, "Hey, so we hear you're going to Spain." And I was like, "Yeah, I'll be back, like August 8th. I know the signing deadline's August 15th. Y'all have 5 weeks to figure out how much money you're going to have left to pay me. And then we'll meet, and I'll either sign or not."
Right.
And that's kind of what happened. Like I got back in, I think like the next day the scout, came to my house and we started talking, and but I pretty much well decided that I was going to go back to Columbia, that I wanted to finish my degree and finish my fourth year.
Well, it actually paid off for you too, because I think you got drafted in the Angels in like the ninth or 10th round the next year. So,
Yeah, I
that
did.
actually
Yeah.
was a good gamble. Actually, it turned out to be good for you. Um, Now that's going to talk to you about that right quick, because less than a year, you didn't really spend a lot of time in the minors when you first came in. You you were less than a year after being drafted, you were called up. Two parts to this. Number one is what do you remember about getting that call? Number one, and number two is, if you had to do it over again, would you have rather have spent more time in the minors before getting called up?
Mm. I'm let's I'll answer the second question first.
Okay.
It's hard to, I don't have any regrets with
Hmm.
how that first year of my career went down. I mean, I definitely wish I couldn't have, would have thrown a pitch here and there.
Right.
Um, and I mean, so I got that opportunity, and and going into the big leagues, been bouncing up and down that whole first year of my first full season, was incredible. I mean, I got to achieve a dream of being a professional baseball player. Made it to the big leagues, had a lot of special moments with family and friends. So it's hard to say that that could have changed. Now, do I think if I could have had some more time to nurture that, maybe that could have helped me? Yeah, sure, maybe. So it's hard to Monday morning quarterback that. As it relates to getting called up, yeah, I remember it distinctly. We were playing in Frisco, Texas. I had made a 1 AA start in Little Rock. We hit the road to Frisco, and we got our ass handed to us. And I was not pitching. This was a Friday night, and I wasn't pitching Saturday. I was scheduled to pitch Sunday.
Hmm.
But we got our ass handed to us on Friday, and I was kind of in the dugout, screwing around like I normally do. Not anything uncalled for, but
Right.
after the game that we got, crushed, I walked in the clubhouse, and the coach pulled me into the office, and I was like, "Oh shit! Like, what did I do?" And then he told me I was going up. I was getting called up, and I was like, "To AAA?" And he was like, "No, to the big leagues."
Oh wow.
And so I didn't, I almost didn't believe him at first. I made him show me the flight, like that they had booked me a flight, because I kind of thought he was yanking my chain. But yeah, I mean, I got called up and was flying out of Dallas, that next morning at like 6. So it was a quick turnaround. You're like packing, and flew into John Wayne Airport, and basically showed right up and pitched 2 innings and got a win. We Pujols hit like a walk-off double, and we got a win, and I got the win. So it was a crazy 24 hours, really, from the time of getting told I was going to the big leagues to getting my first win in Major League Baseball.
Well, like you said, man. I mean, whether you get to play one day in the majors or one inning or whatever, you accomplish something that millions of people don't get to do. So, man, like I said, hats off to you. One thing I want to
Thanks.
talk about is your academics because we touched on that. Now, that's one thing that gets overlooked. You were also very accomplished academically at South Carolina. So you're going through life. You done won a College World Series. You done back to back. Now you went from the bullpen who was just a guy flying on the radar to being the ace. How important was education to you while all this was happening in baseball?
Um, well, I'll tell you 2 stories. So I actually went into South Carolina as a biomedical engineering major. Okay. So I show up as biomed engineering. I do my first like intro class in the fall. And as athletes, we were allowed to like register ahead of most students.
Mhm.
And so I went to register for new classes, and they were going to be, I was going to pick up like a couple engineering classes. And I had an academic advisor for the athletic department and an engineering advisor. Well, when I go to sign on for the engineering classes, they were all afternoon classes. And so I asked an engineering advisor, I was like, "Hey, where's all the morning classes? Like, I need to be done." They're like, "Oh, we don't have any." And I was like, "Well, that's going to be a problem." So that's when I switched to international business. So, I went to Carolina, I cared about academics, but, I wanted to play baseball. So that's when I switched to business. But I mean, academics was drilled into me when I was a kid. My parents expected straight A's when I was younger. And it was fun. Like it was good to have another avenue beyond baseball. So, I enjoyed the classes, most of them at least. And it was, it was just another avenue of kind of getting your mind off of sports at the time.
Right. Well, I'll be honest with you. I got my original degree in business, and then decided that I wanted to go into digital media and journalism. So at 46 years old, I got my degree from Penn State.
Yeah,
In digital media and journalism, because I would it was just more fun for me to do stuff like this
sure.
than, sit behind a desk and try to figure out accounting stuff. So so I was 46 years old. I was the oldest person in my senior class at Penn State. So
There you
that
go.
was just really,
Nice.
really fun stuff.
Yeah.
Now, Brandon Keeler, he's in the chat right now. He's actually the owner of our network. He wants to know, what advice would you give someone who is looking at all their options, whether sports or education, rising up into college?
Mm,
Because
man, I
the
don't.
one thing I've always said about baseball, it's got to be, to me, I would think it's harder than the other sports, because football, yes, you're going to practices, but you play one day a week. Basketball, you may play a couple times. Baseball, you're you're playing, 3 games, on a weekend. You also got the midweek games. Also, you got your practices and your classes.
Yeah, I mean, it's it can be it can be a lot. It can be a lot to balance, especially in college. You gotta find the right um, balance of how you're gonna go to class and study and whatnot. I think I was fortunate in that for me, if I showed up to class and paid attention, then I retained a lot of information, and it led to less studying in the led to less studying at night.
Mm,
Um, I also tried to take my harder classes in the fall and take my easier classes in the spring, just to kind of get a little bit more balance. I think it's really, as much as I wanted to play in the big leagues, even as a kid, but even going into college, I think I knew that I needed to have a backup plan.
right.
And so, and then what I realized later, kind of going into my senior year, was that even if I had the longest career in the big leagues,
Hmm.
let's say I played 10 years, made all the money in the world, I would still have a whole life ahead of me to
Right.
do something else. And knowing the type of person that I am and was at the time, that didn't mean I would just wake up and go play golf every day. It just That's not something that, even if I had all the money
Mentally,
in the
you always
world,
come
that
back
I would
into.
do right now.
Right.
So um, I enjoyed the learning. Again, for the most part, there were certainly classes that I hated and just grinned and bear it to get through. But there were others that were a ton of fun to go in there and RU cases, or um, you know just I enjoyed the learning. So if people were going into college today, I imagine it's a lot different, especially as an athlete.
Hmm.
It seems like maybe the schooling's not even as important. I mean, I know when we were there, Coach Tanner cared about the GPAs we were putting out as a
Right.
team. Um, I hope players still think about that, just because, again, no matter how long you play, you could make all the money in the world, and you could sail off into the sunset and not have to work. And if that's you, that's great. But also, you want to know how to maybe not piss away all your money or not get hoodwinked. So it
Well,
would
look at
be,
all the athletes that you see who made all the money in the world, who are broke now. So
yeah. I mean, it happens. Like,
yeah.
and one of the things that when you're young, like, I mean, when I made it to the big leagues, I made like 200 grand that year, and I thought I was rich, and I was like, this is the most money I've ever seen.
Right.
And but it's kind of a fantasy land. It's not real life. Like, when
Right.
you're in the big leagues, you've got a clubby that will run and grab you a burger at any moment's notice. All you have to do is ask and tip.
Hmm.
And so it's not real life, and it doesn't, that doesn't last. And so you've got to be able to recognize that's kind of like you're in a bubble for that period of life. And when you get out of that bubble, what do you do next?
Yeah. Now, just a couple more questions for you here, Michael, and I'm gonna let you go, my friend. Um, so whenever you decided to call it a career, two parts to this. First of all, what what was your defining moment that you just said, you know what, I just need to call it a career and go and leave baseball? Number one, and number two was you played baseball for so long. How difficult was the transition?
Yeah, so 2017, I was playing for the Rays in AAA in Durham, and ball got hit back at me and I snapped my left index finger. So I had to have it surgically repaired that off season. Um, and one of the things, prior to that, I was with the Giants in AAA,
Mm-hmm.
and with the Giants, I was 27 at the time. I was, not the youngest player on the roster in AAA. I was probably, you know, I was one of the younger players. Like let's call it the bottom third of the team. And
Mm-hmm.
then when I opted out, I signed with the Rays, and I was like the third oldest guy. So I went from being
Right.
one of the younger players to then with the Rays, I was one of the oldest guys, and then I got
Mm-hmm.
hurt. So that whole offseason in 2017, going into 2018, my whole goal was like recover, rehab from surgery and get back to throwing. And so I went into the 2018 season saying, okay, 28, this is my year to like make it back to the big leagues and try to stay, or, I'm going to kind of be shoehorned into this like 4A guy, which is kind of like you're playing in AAA and you go up and down to the big leagues kind of
Mm-hmm.
whenever you're needed. Um, and so I started off the year pretty well, ended up getting traded back to the Rangers in AAA, and um, ended up tweaking my knee on a play, was pitching okay, not great. But really just the season wasn't that much fun anymore for me. And so when I finished up that year, went back at my knee, which was trying to rehab my knee. I was going back to playing the Dominican and for that off season. And whenever I went to play in the Dominican, I had done it 3 times previously, and
Right.
I had had a ton of fun. I mean, that is also baseball in its purest form.
Mm-hmm.
They're paying you, of course, and you're a professional, but all they care about is winning. The fans are like in love with baseball. The fields are, they're not the sexiest. The
Mm-hmm.
clubhouse has cold water when you shower, but it's a ton of fun.
Right.
And when I went down there, I was like, okay, let's go down there and see if like I kind of fall in love with the game again. And I think it was like a weekend. All I could think about was just getting back home to be with my wife and my dog. And that's kind of when I knew I was like, all right, I think it's time to call it a career. So I finished out my time with the Dominican team. I think I left the week after Thanksgiving. And I had some opportunities to go some other places like and go play. But when I was coming home, I knew like, okay, all right, now's the time to hang.
Well, so I have to ask you because my wife, who will watch this video, is like the biggest dog lover I know. Since you mentioned the dog, she's gonna want me to ask you, what kind of dog do you have, and what's the name?
He's an English cream retriever, Murphy.
Ah,
Yeah.
gotcha. I have
So
to
we
let her
still
know
got
that.
we still got that we still have that dog today. Yeah.
Yeah, because I did some interviews, and then that's all she wants me. Because I got an interview with Marcus Lattimore coming up next week, and she says, I don't care what he has to
Okay.
say, I just want to know what type of dog he has. So, and then
That's
and then
funny.
I had to ask Steven Garcia a couple weeks ago the same thing. So,
Nice,
yes,
nice.
she's like, I don't care nothing about what they did on the field. Now we're gonna do a couple quick hits here, man. I'm gonna ask you a quick question. You just answer. Don't have to give me answer. Just one word type of answers. Toughest hitter you faced in college.
Mike Zanino. I could never get him out.
Loudest stadium you pitched in.
Arkansas, I believe.
Ooh, that's still allowed too. Um, One teammate you'd want on the mound if your life depending on winning a game.
Blake Cooper. Ooh, or Matt Price. Matt Price.
Uh Now, better feeling striking out a hitter or getting a double play.
Double play easily.
If the 2010 and 2011 Gamecocks team plays, which team wins the 7-game series?
Hmm. I think 2011 might win actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, man, I just got one final question, Michael, before I let you go. You look back, you've had a storybook type of career. You went, like I said, from Riverside High School, not highly acclaimed. Worked your way up into, the bullpen, you- College World Series, All American, all kinds of unforgettable performances. Looking back on that, what does that journey mean to you now?
Hmm. I think it was just a lot of fun and a testament to the hard work that I was able to put in and just the time and money that really my family spent to help me, pursue the baseball that I enjoyed as a kid. Having kids now, I I'm now starting to recognize the sacrifices that my parents made to let me go play baseball every weekend, starting really at like 11, 10 maybe. And even the money they spent to allow me to do that. So, um, it's it, I've been inducted to the South Carolina Hall of Fame, and there's a Greenville Baseball Hall of Fame, and so those moments have been special just for to be able to recognize my mom and dad, and even my brother and sister, and just the things that my family did, and obviously in my pro career, my wife. And so I think and my kids know that I play baseball. They don't obviously know, they're not nearly old enough to understand kind of what happened or anything. But I think it's a good, it's a good story of the work that you can put in, and the fun that you can have in pursuing something that can be a passion, and the benefits that can come from that.
Now, I had to ask you right quick because you had the kids, so I'm sure they see the pictures. Do they know like the level that you actually played at, like what you
No,
achieved
I've
there?
got
Or they
I've,
just,
I'm, no, I've got a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a
oh, gotcha.
almost 1-year-old. So I mean, there's, um, I mean, I think if you asked, like, I think my daughter and son, my 5 and 3-year-old know that I play baseball, and that like I would like that I like the Gamecocks, but I don't necessarily know that they could put anything beyond that together.
Well, Michael, man, I really appreciate you giving me the time, especially after you had to get your kids to sleep. I know how difficult. Like I said, I got 3 kids of my own, and things don't always go quite as planned. But one thing I want to say, what you and those teams accomplished, at as Gamecock fans, we'll never forget that. It was really great getting an opportunity to go back through those memories and see things from your perspective. So, I definitely appreciate you giving me your time tonight, my friend. And I know you got to get up and go to work and stuff in the morning. So I'm going to let you go ahead and call it a night. And you have yourself a good one. And thanks again for joining me tonight.
Not a problem. Thanks for having me, man.
No problem, buddy. Thank you. Man, that was so cool, man. Getting to talk to Michael Roth. I remember watching those teams so much, man. So, you know, now just to kind of let you guys know what is coming up tomorrow, I have Jake Crane from On Three. He will be joining me tomorrow night at 8 p.m. And also following that Thursday, I have Thomas Hutler from the Seattle Mariners. He is the play-by-play guy. I'm sorry, he's the PA announcer for the Seattle Mariners. Monday, I will have a very special guest. Monday, we'll have Marcus Lattimore. He's agreed to come on. That's going to be a lot of fun interview as well. The guys on the main show, the Sports Nuts, they have some great guests coming on also. So, like I said, stay tuned. They are on Tuesday nights and Friday nights. So, you got all your sports action coming. So now I'm going to go ahead and hit you guys. You can enjoy my outro, and you guys have a great rest of your night.